A debt collector laughed in a man's face over a $28 land settlement. Then his wife found a folder of 1974 receipts that nobody was supposed to remember. What happened in that courtroom 23 years later is something Harlan Voss still hasn't recovered from. The project manager called at 7:09 on a Tuesday morning. His voice was tight. He said the North Corridor was frozen. He said the concrete trucks were idling on County Road 9 with nowhere to go. He said a strip of land, 12 feet wide, half a mile long, was blocking a $4.2 million development project, and the deed belonged to a man named Earl Crane. Harlan Voss picked up his second phone before the call ended. Nobody on his team could explain it. They had run the title search twice. They had paid 3 surveyors. The land looked like nothing. It had always looked like nothing. It was a weed-covered strip running along the north edge of the county road, too narrow to build on, too far from the main parcels to matter. Except it did matter. It had mattered for 23 years. And Harlan Voss had handed it away himself. Pembroke County Fairgrounds. August 14, 2001. The county ran its tax lien auction on the second Tuesday of every August. Folding tables. A card table with a coffee pot and paper cups. For locals standing in the gravel lot because there was nowhere to sit. Earl Crane stood near the back. He was 34 years old. He wore a canvas jacket with a frayed left cuff. He had driven 40 minutes from the house he shared with his wife, Norma, and their daughter Claire, who was 12 and had stayed home because school started in 9 days. Earl wasn't there for the big parcels. He was there for Lot 7. Lot 7 was 12 feet wide. It ran half a mile along County Road 9 and dead-ended into a drainage ditch. No road access on its own. No buildable area. The county had been taxing it at $28 a year, and the previous owner had stopped paying in 1998. 3 years of back taxes. Total owed, $84. Nobody bid. Harlan Voss was at the front table. He was 47 years old and had just closed a deal on 280 acres of farmland a quarter mile north. He had the kind of confidence that arrives before a man speaks. Clipboard. Pen tucked behind his ear. A coffee cup he hadn't touched. He watched the auctioneer's stall on Lot 7. Then he looked back at Earl Crane. He laughed. Short and loud. He said, "No reason to write it down, let whoever wants it have it." The auctioneer looked at Earl. Earl raised one finger. Harlan said something to the man beside him. The man beside him smiled. Earl didn't look at Harlan. He walked to the folding table, paid $84 in back taxes, and signed his name on the deed transfer. The clerk stamped it. She tore off a receipt and handed it to Earl. Earl folded it once. He put it in the inside pocket of his canvas jacket. He drove 40 minutes home. Norma was at the kitchen table when he came in. She was grading papers. She taught 3rd grade at Pembroke Elementary, and she had a red pen behind her ear. Earl set his keys on the counter. She said, "How'd it go?" He said, "Got what I needed." She looked up. He didn't say anything else. He poured himself a glass of water and stood at the window looking at the backyard for a long time. She went back to grading. That was the thing about Earl that Norma had understood since before they were married. He didn't talk when there was nothing left to say. And when he got quiet like that, still, but not empty, it meant he was holding something carefully. She didn't push. He would show her when it was time. That night, Earl sat at the kitchen table after Norma went to bed. He had a notebook in front of him. The notebook was green, with a black binding. Norma had given it to him 2 Christmases earlier. He had used 7 pages. He opened it to page 8. He wrote the date. He wrote the parcel number. He wrote $84 paid, deed transferred, receipt secured. Then he wrote one more line. He didn't write it loud. He didn't underline it. He just wrote it, and closed the notebook and sat there in the quiet kitchen for another 20 minutes. He knew something. He had known it since March. And nobody in that gravel lot, not Harlan Voss, not the auctioneer, not the man who had smiled at the joke, had any idea what he was sitting on. If this story is making your jaw drop, you haven't even seen the best part yet. Hit subscribe and keep watching, because what Earl does next is the move nobody in Pembroke County ever saw coming. Pembroke Public Library. March 3, 2001. A single folder sat on the reading room table. It was manila. The tab was handwritten in blue ink that had faded to gray. It read, Any Corridor, Infrastructure, 1956 to 1974. Earl had been coming to the library every Thursday evening for 6 weeks. He wasn't looking for history. He was looking for paperwork. It started with a conversation he'd had with his neighbor, Art, who had farmed the north side of County Road 9 for 30 years. Art said something in passing, at the hardware store, in November. He said the county had big plans for that corridor once. Said there was talk of a water trunk line running through their back when his father was alive. Said it never happened, but he wasn't sure why. Earl had written that down that night. Then he started pulling records. The county zoning office kept copies of infrastructure plans going back to 1950. Most of them were never touched. The librarian, a woman named Mrs. Hollis, had to retrieve 3 of the folders from a climate-controlled storage room in the basement. She said she didn't think anyone had requested them since the 80s. Earl thanked her. He sat down. He started reading. The 1956 plan was the one. Pembroke Township had drafted a full Northeast Corridor infrastructure proposal that year. It called for a water trunk line running from the municipal reservoir to a planned commercial expansion zone. The route was mapped. The easements were drawn. The corridor was laid out exactly, running through a 12-foot wide strip of land along the north edge of County Road 9, half a mile long, connecting to the main system at the township boundary. The project was shelved in 1961. Funding fell through. The state changed its highway plans. The corridor was never built. But the easement rights were never formally canceled. Earl read that sentence 4 times. He turned back 2 pages to confirm. He found the reference number. He wrote it in his notebook. He came back the following Thursday. Mrs. Hollis had the 1974 folder waiting for him. Inside was a property abstract. Dated April 3, 1974. It confirmed what the 1956 plan had implied, a recorded water rights covenant, still active, still on the books, granting any future owner of that 12-foot strip the legal right to authorize, or refuse, utility access through the Northeast Corridor. The covenant had never been referenced in a title search. It had never appeared in a development application. No surveyor had flagged it. No attorney had found it. No county planner had checked for it in 30 years. Earl set the folder down. He looked at the wall. He sat like that for about 2 minutes. Then he took a sheet of paper from his jacket pocket and drew a map by hand. He sketched the strip. He marked the corridor. He noted the 1974 covenant in the upper right corner with the reference number underneath. He folded the map once. He put it in his jacket pocket, next to the receipt from the auction 5 months later. Both pieces of paper would stay in that pocket for a long time. He told Norma that night. Not everything. Just enough. She was at the kitchen table with her tea. The kettle was still warm on the stove. Claire had gone to bed early. He spread the hand-drawn map on the table. She looked at it for a moment. She said, "Is this the land on County Road 9? He said, "Yes." She said, "And?" He said, "It's the only legal route through the Northeast Corridor." She looked at the map again. She looked at him. She didn't ask anything else. She folded her hands around her mug and sat there while he traced the corridor line with his finger. That was enough. Over the following months, Earl watched. He drove past County Road 9 twice a week on his way to the hardware co-op. He started keeping a separate section in his notebook: dates, observations, truck counts. In April, orange survey flags appeared along the north edge of Art's old farmland. In June, a registered LLC called NDC Holdings filed a land purchase with the county clerk's office. In September, a second LLC filed. In November, a third. Earl looked up each LLC in the state business registry. All three were registered to the same agent in the same city. He wrote the agent's name in a notebook. He already knew who was behind it. He had recognized the initials on the first filing. By the end of 2001, Harlan Voss and his related entities had quietly assembled 274 acres in the Northeast Corridor. The parcels were staggered, purchased under different company names, so no single filing showed the full picture. But in the notebook, Earl had drawn the full picture. 274 acres. 6 parcels. 1 planned commercial zone. And running directly through the only practical utility route to all of it, 12 feet wide, half a mile long, a strip of land that now belonged to Earl Crane. He sat at the kitchen table on a December night and laid the hand-drawn map next to the notebook. He looked at both of them for a long time. Then he wrote one line in the notebook. He closed it. The trap was set. Now he just had to wait. $42,000. The man on the front porch said it like it was the end of the conversation. He was young, maybe 30, in a gray jacket with a company logo on the lapel. He held a clipboard with a single sheet of paper on it. He said his client had authorized him to offer $42,000 for the strip on County Road 9, clean transfer, no contingencies, closing in 2 weeks. Earl was holding a coffee cup. He said, "No thank you." The man blinked. He said, "Just to be clear, we're talking about a 12-foot strip you paid $84 for." Earl said, "I know what I paid." The man looked down at his clipboard. He looked up again. He said he could probably go to 48 if Earl needed a day to think. Earl said, "I don't need a day." He thanked the man. He closed the door. He went to the kitchen and refilled his coffee. That was the spring of 2004. Every year since 2001, Earl had paid the annual tax assessment on the strip. $41. Then $41 again. Then $43 when the rate adjusted. He paid in person at the county clerk's office, in cash, and kept the receipt. He filed each one in a brown envelope he kept in the kitchen drawer beside the dish towels. He mowed the strip twice a year. Spring and fall. He kept the survey markers clear. He walked the half-mile length once each October, just to look at it. Norma never asked why. She had stopped asking about the strip somewhere around 2002. She just knew it mattered. The second offer came by phone in the fall of 2006. A county official. Formal tone. He said the Pembroke Township Planning Office had identified Earl's parcel as a potential acquisition for public infrastructure purposes. He said the county could move through eminent domain if needed, but they preferred a voluntary transfer. He said the assessed value was $6,200. Earl said, "I'm not interested in a voluntary transfer." The official said, "We may need to revisit this formally." Earl said, "That's fine." He hung up. He opened his notebook. He wrote the date and the name of the official and the number the man had offered. He drew a line under it. Below the line he wrote, "Still no." Norma found him at the kitchen table that night. She put the kettle on without being asked. She sat down across from him and looked at the notebook. She said, "How much?" He said, $6,200. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are we right about this?" He looked up. He said, "Yes." She nodded. She poured the tea when the kettle whistled. She didn't bring it up again. Claire was 16 that year. She had driven out to the strip with Earl once, in October, the way she had done since she was 12. She walked beside him and didn't ask many questions. But once, standing at the north end where the drainage ditch met the county road, she had looked down the length of the strip and said, "Why does it matter, exactly?" Earl had said, "Because of where it sits." She had thought about that for a moment. Then she had said, "Like a door?" He had looked at her. He said, "Exactly like a door." She didn't say anything else. Neither did he. She had filed that away somewhere. Earl could tell. Harlan Voss had been patient too. But his patience was running on a schedule. By 2007, the Northeast Corridor commercial project had a bank behind it, a construction timeline, and a city council resolution. The plan called for a mixed-use development on 274 acres, retail, warehouse, 2-pad sites. Infrastructure had to be in the ground by 2010 to keep the financing alive. In a boardroom in the county seat, his project attorney spread a site map on the table and pointed to a 12-foot wide blank space running through the north edge of the plan. He said the utility route went through that strip. He said there was no alternate route that didn't add $900,000 in rerouting costs and 3 months to the schedule. Harlan stared at the map. He remembered the gravel lot. He remembered the coffee cup he hadn't touched. He remembered the laugh. He told his attorney to send someone directly. The third offer came on a Wednesday morning in the spring of 2008. A man in a 3-piece suit drove up the county road and parked in front of the house. He carried a leather briefcase. He knocked once, then waited with his hands at his sides. Earl opened the door. The man introduced himself as a partner at a firm Earl had never heard of. He said he represented a development group with a significant interest in the Northeast Corridor. He said his client was prepared to offer $190,000 for the parcel, final and unconditional. Earl said, "Come in." He poured 2 cups of coffee at the kitchen table. The man set his briefcase on the floor and did not open it. They sat there for a moment. Earl said, "I'm not selling." The man said his client had authorized him to go higher. Earl said it wouldn't matter. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What would it take?" Earl said, "It's not about a number." He walked the man to the door. He thanked him for making the drive. He went back inside. He sat at the kitchen table. He opened the notebook to the page where he had written December 2001, the night he had closed it, and said the trap was set. He turned to a fresh page. He wrote the date. He wrote $190,000 refused. Then he sat there in the quiet kitchen for a while. Outside, it was a still morning. No trucks. No flags. No one walking the fence line. The strip was just sitting there, the same as it always had. The phone on the counter was quiet. Until it wasn't. Earl looked at the screen. Unknown number. County Exchange. He picked it up on the second ring. The voice on the other end didn't say hello. It said his client was prepared to discuss terms, not a purchase. Earl set down his coffee cup. He said, "I'm listening." The attorney, same 3-piece suit, different phone, said his client had accepted that a sale was not on the table. He said there was another structure they wanted to discuss. He said the word easement. Earl said, "I know what an easement is." He said, "I'll have someone call you back." He hung up before the attorney finished his next sentence. He called Claire that afternoon. She was 31. She had spent the last 6 years practicing property law in the city, and she answered on the first ring the way she always did when he called. He said, "I think it's time." She said, "I'll be there Saturday." She arrived at 9 in the morning with a file box, a laptop, and a thermos of coffee. She spread the permit file across the kitchen table next to the original deed. She placed Earl's notebook beside both of them. She read in silence for 14 minutes. Then she looked up. She said, "Dad? This is exactly what you said it was." Earl nodded. She said, "You've been paying the taxes every year?" He slid the brown envelope across the table. She opened it. 23 receipts. Every year. Never late. She said, "Do you still have the original filing? The 1974 covenant?" Earl reached into his canvas jacket, the same jacket, the cuffs worn through in 2 places now, and pulled a folded piece of paper from the inside pocket. The photocopy from the library. March 2001. Claire took it carefully. She read it twice. She said, "They're going to challenge abandonment?" Earl said, "I know." She said, "They're going to say the covenant lapsed because nobody invoked it." He said, "But the county kept taxing me." She looked at him. He said, "You can't tax an abandoned parcel." She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. County Administrative Court. A single judge, a clerk, and a court reporter. Harlan Voss sat at the far table with 2 attorneys and a project manager who had driven down from the city. He looked the same. Older, but the same. He had not looked at Earl once since they walked in. His lead attorney argued abandonment. He said the 1974 covenant had not been invoked in 47 years. He said the rights had lapsed through non-use. He cited 3 cases. Claire stood up. She placed 3 documents on the table. She set them down one at a time, quietly, like she was laying cards in a game that was already decided. The first was the original 1974 filing. Reference number intact. The second was the county's own 1988 resolution, the one Voss's attorneys had claimed superseded the covenant. It had a clause on page 4 that Claire read aloud in one sentence. The resolution applied only to parcels that had lapsed in tax payment within the preceding 10 years. The third was the brown envelope. 23 receipts. Every year. She said, the parcel was never abandoned. The county itself has billed my father annually for 23 consecutive years. You cannot collect taxes on land you consider abandoned. The judge asked Voss's attorney for a response. He reached for his phone instead. The judge ruled in 4 minutes. Negotiations lasted 2 weeks. Earl refused every version of a lump sum offer. He was clear about that from the first call. Claire put it in the opening letter. Her client was not interested in a one-time payment. He was interested in terms. The final agreement took 4 sessions. A permanent access easement, recorded in Pembroke County, granting Voss Drexel Development and all successor entities the right to run utility infrastructure through the 12-foot strip on County Road 9. Monthly payment to Earl Crane, $1,600. Adjusted annually for inflation. Transferable in full to his heirs. Active for as long as any structure in the Northeast Corridor drew utility service through that corridor. Legal duration, in perpetuity. Voss's attorney pushed back on the inflation clause. Claire said, those are the terms. He pushed back on the air transfer. She said, those are the terms. He accepted everything on a Tuesday afternoon. He called Claire. She called Earl. He answered on the second ring. She said they took it. He said all of it? She said every term. He said good. He hung up. He walked to the kitchen. Norma was at the table with a book. She looked up. He didn't have to say anything. She put the kettle on. The signing was at the county clerk's office on a Friday morning. 8 minutes. 4 signatures. 1 notary. Earl walked out to his truck. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment. He opened the green notebook, the one Norma had given him 2 Christmases before all of this started. He turned to the last page with writing on it. The line from December 2001. He turned to the next blank page. He wrote the date. He wrote $1,600 per month, in perpetuity. He closed the notebook. 2 weeks later, the local paper ran a brief item about the Northeast Corridor project breaking ground. It mentioned the easement agreement. It did not name a dollar amount. Harlan Voss did not comment. The 4 locals who had been in that gravel lot in August 2001, the ones who had heard the laugh, the ones who had watched Earl walk quietly to the folding table, each of them read the item in their own way, in their own kitchens, and did not say anything out loud. Some men spent 23 years building on 274 acres. Earl Crane spent 23 years holding 12 feet. And those 12 feet paid him every month for the rest of his life. So here's the question. Would you have taken the $190,000 on the spot, or would you have held out for the monthly deal? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've ever held on to something everyone else told you to let go of, we want to hear that story too. Thanks for watching.